Hey there, this is me from the future of when I film the rest of this video. I just want to do a quick update because in the video I mentioned that my younger sister and I had a massive falling out in which she sent a pretty nasty message that she never apologized for. I just wanted to do a quick update to that because obviously, in all fairness to the situation, I don't want you guys going away thinking, one thing or the other. And I'm putting that at the beginning here just in case people are clicking off later because it's a long ass video. I get it. An update on the situation with her is that pretty shortly after I filmed that, we ended up back in contact. Kind of a long story, but yeah, we've exchanged a few emails back and forth. At one point, she kind of, in her own way, apologized for the sending that message. So we're on more friendly terms as of right now, but I just thought, it's only fair since I said the things that I did about everybody, that I should be as fair as possible and give the most updated version of things possible to you guys. Anyway, excuse me, this is a long ass video, like I said, but I do hope that you will watch the whole thing because it's important. It's important to me. It is my story, and I think that it is worth listening to, personally. So anyway, thank you guys, and enjoy the video. Hi. I just wanted to do a video. It's going to be a bit long, and I apologize for that in advance. But I've just been doing a lot of thinking over the last few years, especially more recently. And I wanted to talk, kind of what it says on the tin. I want to talk about my deconversion and kind of the aftermath of that. So I just wanted to put it out there right off the bat. This is not an attack on Christianity. This isn't even an attack on specific people, even though I will be naming a few names that people might know, people I might be related to. This is just me telling my story, and just sharing my experience, because there was kind of it was an experience. Let's just put it that way. You'll see how it was. It's been long enough that I can kind of deal with it, and I don't know. I'm in this space where I just feel like I need to speak the truth, and hopefully I can even bring down some barriers between the non-Christian community and the evangelical community, because I feel like that's something that needs to happen. There's so much misunderstanding and willful misunderstanding in some cases. And I just wanted to sort of break down those myths and mainly talk about what happened to me after after I stopped being a Christian. But before I do that, I'm going to talk a little bit about why I deconverted, the deconversion process that I have or I had. Sorry, the dogs are making noise at me, or anyway. So as probably a lot of you guys know, I was raised in the conservative evangelical community. I was homeschooled, the whole 9 yards. I accepted Jesus when I was 5. I was baptized when I was 10, blah, 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 blah. Pardon me. And part of that process was, sorry, I lost my place. Part of what happened while I was being brought up, something very significant growing up, was that I was emotionally abused by my Christian parents. And I had to live with that, and I still continue to have to live with that probably for the rest of my life. And it was tough, and they still haven't really admitted to any wrongdoing or tried to permanently change their ways. and that sucks. And I don't think I realized how bad it was until about 2016, 2017. I started to kind of glimpse down the abyss, as it were, and realized that this was much more complicated than I thought it was. And coming to realize that, I think realizing just how much pain I was, and how much trauma there was there, although I had really no idea at the time. I just had like a sort of idea. It really caused a lot of cognitive dissonance for me. Cognitive dissonance basically being when two things exist in your life, ideologically and practically, that are completely incompatible with each other to the point of sort of to a kind of breaking point, is where it got to me. I mean, we all live with a certain amount of cognitive dissonance, I guess, as it were. But that was kind of the breaking point, I think, for me, because it's like, here I am, I've been raised by abusive Christian parents my whole life. I've never had justice for it. I never experienced unconditional love from people in my life, on a long-term basis anyway, especially not the people that raised me. I grew up believing that there was something inherently wrong with me, that I was, totally flawed, and that I was unworthy of unconditional love based on how they were treating me. And it's, it goes very much opposite to what I was then brought up believing about God, which is God is love, God is truth, God is just. I was lied to my whole life about who I was. I didn't see any justice for the things that were done to me. And the thing is that it wasn't just me that this happened to. I grew up with people who grew up in similar families. My parents surrounded themselves with people who raised their kids similarly and were equally, if not more, abusive to their kids. One of my good friends growing up had even worse done to her by her Christian parents. So, and this is a pattern that happened in the evangelical community, and I would guess continues to happen in the evangelical community, because they have just very strict views on things, and it can lead to some very abusive tendencies. Not all evangelicals, obviously, but unfortunately the fundamentalists that I was brought up with, it was rife with that kind of treatment of their children. And on top of that, and I think this is part of what made things even worse, is that obviously I got out of it. I started to kind of put some distance between me and my parents, because I needed to, for my own mental health. And people would ask me, do you, especially after I moved to Houston, because it was just before I moved to Houston, was kind of when I kind of came to grips with that. And when I first moved to Houston, what do your parents think about you moving here? And I'm like, I don't really care. And I would explain, hey, my parents were emotionally abusive to people that I met. And so often the response was, there wasn't like I'm so sorry that happened to you. It was, honor your mother and father. It was like they couldn't stand the idea of me coming to them, somebody that they didn't know my parents, they didn't know what happened, and yet they didn't care what my side of the story was. They were concerned with honor thy mother and father. Boom. That's the only thing that matters. And the thing is, my mental health, devolved rather quickly after I moved to Houston. Because, I was alone. I was in a new city. I didn't have close friends. And on top of it, I'm dealing with chronic depression, chronic suicidal depression, I might add. And, anxiety, a whole host of other things. And so I sought counseling. I sought counseling within the church because it was free, and I was poor, and I needed mental health help. And I was saying, hey, I'm suffering from depression and all of this kind of stuff. And they're like, the minute that they caught wind of the fact that, I was saying things like, oh, my parents were abusive, because it's like, I knew I was depressed because I'd gone through trauma. And this is what I'm telling them. I'm depressed because I went through trauma. And what they're telling me is, no, you're not depressed because you went through trauma. You're depressed because you have sin in your life, and that sin is not forgiving your parents for abusing you. And therefore, if you forgive your parents for abusing you, then you're not going to have depression and anxiety and all the other things anymore, and your life is going to be amazing again, which obviously was not true. And it was hurtful because, I'm going in and day out every week, and that's what they're telling me. They're not listening to me. They're not validating me. In fact, when I actually went to a real therapist who was a Christian therapist, and I told her I'm here because I've got all these mental health issues and I was abused, her response was, "Oh my God, that's so horrible." And I was like, I almost cried because I had spent years of people telling me that my feelings weren't valid, people in the church. So it wasn't like, oh, I grew up around shitty people and then everything else was great after that. It was, I grew up around, people who were toxic and abusive, and then that got perpetuated in the people that I hung out with that were more, I guess you could say they were like more well-adjusted. They seemed more well-adjusted. I don't know, but they didn't seem as toxic. And yet they're, coming back at me saying, honor thy mother and father. And they're, these are all people from different walks of life, different backgrounds, different, attachment issues. And this is what, I'm being told. My point of view isn't being honored. It's not being respected or even listened to. And it's one thing if I had a bad take, but again, I didn't. This was my experience, and the thing is, I lived with that for years until it just kind of got to this point of I am messed up. I'm like really messed up in the head, realizing that, and God has never shown up to make things better. All Christians have ever done is just make things worse. And you would think that a God of truth and love and justice and all these things would want, for me to have validation and healing, and I wasn't getting it anywhere in the church. I wasn't getting it from the people I surrounded myself with, which, these were not bad people. I'm not trying to diss people here. A lot of them were extremely nice people. They had just been so brainwashed into this whole honor thy mother and father, don't disrespect your parents, crap, that they weren't willing to make an exception for somebody who had been through abuse. In their minds, abuse doesn't happen with godly parents, I think. I don't really know. And like I said, it just kind of boiled up to this point of like, I can't, I've never had God come to my rescue. I've never had God come through for me on these things. And on so many other things in my life. I spent a long time unemployed. I spent a long time just struggling, and nobody was helping me. And I wasn't getting work no matter how many jobs I applied for. And I was being, basically being treated like, you're just not trying hard enough. God helps those who help themselves, sort of thing. And that was like, that's how, all it did was just perpetuate those cycles of abuse, of shaming myself for not being good enough, and blaming myself for the bad things that happened in my life. And it just got to be too much. It wasn't healthy for me anymore. And I even talked to my Christian therapist about it. And I mean, she's a, licensed professional therapist. And she basically said, this isn't working for you anymore. This is clearly not working for you anymore. You need to find what does work for you, is basically what she told me. Her exact words were like, you need to fire God. Like, this is what my Christian therapist is telling me. And that kind of was the push that I needed to sort of go, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to step away from this. I never intended, I don't think, to really fully walk away from Christianity forever. And who knows what's going to happen in the future. But I walked away and said, you know what? If God exists, if God is real, if any of this is real, God's going to show up, and and I'll know, I'll know when it is, because I've always considered myself very, sensitive to spiritual things, and I did. That's what I did, and I don't regret that decision. Like, I have zero regrets. My life didn't fall apart. My life didn't, like, the world didn't eat me alive. I mean, I posted about this a couple years ago, a year after I made that decision. Sorry. And all the things that I'd been taught that would happen the minute that I stepped away from the church, like, never happened. And all of a sudden I was happy for the first time. I was enjoying my life. I was living the life that I wanted to live. I was expressing myself the way that I wanted to express myself. And that continues to be my experience. Now, that doesn't mean that everything was sunshine and roses, obviously, or else I wouldn't be making this video. But, I just want to say, like, what the decision that I made to walk away so that I wasn't perpetuating these abuse cycles, so that I, could find some kind of solace, whatever, was the best decision that I ever made for my life. And I have no regrets. And by the way, if you're sitting there and you're like on the fence, but you're thinking about all the things that you got told growing up that would happen to you, they won't happen to you. Yeah, my life has fallen apart a little bit, but that's because it was already broken to begin with, and I was just being held together by Jesus tape. And now I'm learning to rebuild it with, actual brick and mortar, and it's going great. It really is. And, but that didn't stop people from having a problem. Now, here's the thing. When I stopped being a Christian, I had to go out and be like, oh my God, guys, I'm an atheist, hello, and shove it in people's faces, whatever. I grew up in the evangelical church. I knew what was going to happen. I knew that that wasn't going to really be received so well by the majority of people. And I still had time to serve at the church that I was at, because I was in the band, and I had told them that my end date was later, and so I had a commitment. I couldn't get out of it. So I still showed up for it, and so I still had to go through the motions. And the thing is back when I was still kind of struggling with it a few months, prior, I'd been through a lot of distress, because all these, feelings of trauma and emotional distress were starting to come up, and I was just wrestling. I mean, it's a lot to wrestle with, and it was all I could do to not be, a complete mess every Sunday. And one of the girls that was on the worship team, I actually went to Bible college with previously. It's how we knew each other. And she reached out to me and was like, hey, I've noticed, you've been a little, under the weather, as it were, lately. And I don't remember exact words. What's up? What can I do for you? Can I help you? Whatever. And I just told her, I was honest with her. I'm like, listen, I'm just really struggling with my faith right now. And her response was, really canned. Again, this is over text, but her actions afterwards definitely cemented this idea, like, I'm not gonna, go around advertising this, because she wouldn't look me in the eye after that. Like, I swear, she didn't talk to, I don't remember her talking to me after that. It was like I didn't exist. And that was hurtful, because it's like, I don't open up to people very easily, but I thought I could trust her, and apparently I couldn't. So that was kind of an early on experience that kind of clued me into, be careful who you tell about this. Like I said, I already kind of had that caution in the back of my head, because I'd seen people leave the church, and I've seen what happens to them. I've been in the church my whole life. So, the first person I actually told was my own sister, Teresa. A lot of you guys know who that is. She and I have been close, ever since we were in high school. And she had seen, how my parents had treated me. And yeah, there was a certain time when she participated in it, like when we were little. But when we got older and I shared with her, hey, that was actually super hurtful, and she understood sort of why it was hurtful and what she did, like, she apologized to me. She was like, I shouldn't have done that, and I'm sorry. That was not okay. And like that, she was the only one that ever did that. And we were close. I was there for the birth of her second child, her daughter. I literally photographed the whole event. She was there for me. She's seen, the shit I've gone through. And so I thought that sharing this with her, she would understand. She knew where I was coming from. And when I did, and when she finally, when it kind of, it took her a little bit to really understand what I was talking about. But once I finally communicated properly with her, her response basically was to text me and say, we can't be close anymore. Like, over text. Okay, bitch. Like, over text. So Anyway, that was hurtful, as you can imagine. She definitely went back on, I think she went back on it. Okay, I shouldn't say definitely. I think she went back on it at one point, over the next few months. But just before I moved to Australia, she and I had a talk, and she basically went back and said, yeah, no, you and I can't be close anymore. We can't be friends. You know, there's nothing here. And it was because I wasn't a Christian. And that's literally the only reason. It's not like I did something to offend her or something like that. That was the only reason that she cited. That was the only thing. You're not a Christian anymore. We can't be close. And that was that. I didn't think I'd probably hear much from her, but I thought, maybe I can email her every once in a while with pictures of my adventures, just so her kids can see, whatever. Maybe I can still have my nieces and nephews in my life. And then about 6 months after I moved to Australia, she texts me over Instagram, and basically says, I miss you. Woohoo. And then, but I'm praying that God wrecks your life. Those were her words. I'm praying that God wrecks your life. With the implication being so that I would become a Christian again, and she and I could be friends again. And as you can imagine, that hurt me deeply, and it made me pretty angry. I'm not gonna lie. I was mad as hell about that. Because it's just like, it was just kind of a slap in your face, It's like she made this decision to cut me out of her life, and then instead of either just accepting, like, you know what, I made my bed, now I gotta lie in it, I have an uncomfortable feeling, gotta deal with it. Instead of that, what I get is her coming back to me and just rubbing salt in the wound, saying, I miss you, and that makes me unhappy, so I'm gonna wish that horrible things happen to you so that you'll come back and start believing the things that I think that you should believe, and we can be friends again on my terms. That's just really messed up, I think. It just felt really messed up, And it was, like I said, this is somebody who's been there for me for so long, and I thought knew me and knew that, hey, I'm the same person. Like, yeah, okay, a few things about me have changed since I stopped being a Christian. Yeah, I mean, everybody changes, especially when they go through a massive ideological shift. But the core of who I am has very much stayed the same. The things that I value, the things that I care about, the things that make me happy, they're the same as they always were. And the things that she and I have in common, they're the same as they always were. I mean, I did go off on her, I'm not gonna lie. I've since apologized, she hasn't, and that's it. We haven't talked at all. I have no idea what's going on with her life, like at all. So the second person that I told was my best friend. Obviously, you always tell your best friend. And at first, she was like really supportive. She was, she had seen what Teresa had done, and she was like, no, I'd never do that to you. And, you got to do what you got to do, which is a phrase that I have come to deeply distrust, as you will see. And I think, like some other people, she thought that I was just going to go sow my wild oats, find out that the world is not a good place, and come back, and I didn't happen. And I started shifting further and further away from her as far as like ideologically. Mainly, let's just be honest, I was shifting farther to the left, politically speaking. And she wanted to blame it on the fact that I was with this leftist boyfriend. I'm with Alex. He's a massive leftist, as you guys know. Some of you guys know. And that's not a bad thing. It's a really good thing. But the reality is that the reason that he and I were compatible to begin with is because I had those tendencies anyway. And he just, he met me literally three or so months, I think, after my deconversion. So you can, I was a new atheist, as it were, new ex-evangelical, baby ex-evangelical. And he was there, whatever. But all that to say, I came to the conclusions that I came to because it held up for me and the way that I saw the world, not because I was with, some guy, dumb. She knows me better than that. She knows that that's not who I was. And the thing is that instead of just like being supportive or just going, you know what, we both have different viewpoints, which is where I was willing to be. We have different viewpoints, but we still have a lot in common. We still really care about each other. She just got very aggressive of going out of her way to bring up things that she knew that she and I would never agree on. And then just pound me over the head for it, you know. And I just got to this point, you know, simultaneously not being supportive of my relationship for no other reason than the fact that I'm guessing it was because it was polyamorous. She never gave a good reason for not being supportive of my relationship with Alex. Because, you know, had she given a good reason, I might have thought twice about it, but she didn't. So, anyway, it was just this constant, like, being unsupportive, going out of her way to, you know, go after me for my beliefs, and then, you know, expecting me to agree with her on everything and support her in the decisions she was making, you know, which I did. I'm a supportive friend, whatever. But it just got to be too much for me. I just kind of had to walk away from it. The one thing about me is that people may or may not know is that it is moderately easy for me to walk away from things because I've been so hurt in my life that my kind of gut response, honestly, is just to give up and walk away. Just to shut down. It's a shutdown mechanism. It really is what it is. But, you know, it's sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes I end up regretting it. But I think it's just a reaction because of my trauma. And so anyway, you know, like that's two people that I was close to gone from my life. You know, of course, my mom got wind of all of this shortly after it happened when it comes to, you know, me deconverting. And then she tried to have a conversation with me. Why aren't you a Christian anymore? And like, you should be a Christian. And like, I don't want to talk to her about this. This is the last person I wanted to talk to about it, because it's like, part of the reason that I got on this thing, like I said, was because of the fact that she was abusive, and that is something that she's never been willing to truly admit or own up or really fundamentally change. And so it's kind of like, why would I talk to you about this? Like, and yet she just kept pursuing that boundary. Like, even when I tried to make it as clear as possible that I'm not really interested in talking about this, she would message me. You know, she messaged me shortly after I moved to Australia saying, you know, you need to be a Christian, and here's this video from somebody saying why you should be a Christian. And I was done. I was so done with it. And I was like, you know what, Mom, like, guess what? I am not a Christian, and part of that has to do with the fact that you guys were abusive to us. Like, I'm just not gonna lie about that, you know? And, you know, that hurt me deep, you know, and that's just like, I just wanted the conversation to be over, to be honest with you. And I was just kind of like, you are the last person that should be telling me whether or not I should be a Christian because of all of this. And her response back to me was, I'm sorry that was your experience, but you still need to be a Christian. I was like, okay. Needless to say, we really haven't talked much since. Yeah. That was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back for me in so many ways, where I'm like, we're having hard boundaries now. Like, before I was just pretending like we all understood what was going on, but now I'm just gonna tell you, like, I'm very much done with this, and I don't want to have a relationship with you anymore, because that's just, again, you know, part of the reason I walked away is to get rid of the abuse cycles. And if I continue to talk to somebody who their whole thing is gonna be denying who I am as a person and telling me it doesn't matter who you are, you just have to be a Christian, doesn't matter if I hurt you, you should still listen to me, then yeah, I'm done. I'm so done with that. And the thing is that, you know, had it just been the people closest to me at the time, you could have chalked it up to, you know, I just surrounded myself with not so great people at a certain point in my life. And, you know, maybe that's understandable. But the thing is that it became a pattern, a widening pattern. I had this person in my life who had been kind of an adopted mom to me, and who, again, at the beginning of all this was like, oh yeah, you need to do what you got to do, you know? Like, you do you. And then the minute it became clear that I'm not coming back, because, like, again, it was right around the time I said, hey guys, I'm in a polyamorous relationship, that then she messages me and is like, okay, it's time to be done sowing your wild oats. Like, you know what's right. And I was like, do I? Because that's really where I was like, I don't know if I know what's right, but I don't think it's what you think is right. And it just felt really insulting, to be honest, because it's like I'm on this personal journey of self-discovery, and we all have to go through it really to find ourselves, and you're going to come here and tell me what I should and shouldn't be thinking, you know. And she knew the crap that I went through. So again, like I don't know, it hurt. It always hurts when somebody tries to tell you how to think and doesn't acknowledge that you might have a valid point of view, and a valid reason for doing what you did. So anyway, so that happened, and then it just became, like I said, then it happened sort of in the wider community of my Facebook and my Facebook friends. I'd post something that was at all leftist, and I would get people on my Facebook harassing me, not just being like, oh, hey, we have differing opinions, because honey, I respect that. Like, I do. We all have different opinions, and some are maybe better takes than others, but I'm not gonna go out of my way to get on your Facebook and be like, you're wrong. But that's what they were doing. They're getting on my Facebook, going out of my way, people I haven't talked to in years, who haven't even tried to have a relationship with me in years, jumping on my Facebook telling me you're wrong and I'm right and you need to agree with me, essentially. And and that happened even when I came out and said, hey guys, I talked about being in a polyamorous relationship. I had people commenting on there being like, that's wrong. People who I used to go out with this guy that was emotionally abusive. Part of the reason why I figured out that I had been emotionally abused was because of that experience. And for nearly a year, that relationship made my life a living hell. And the person that lived with me, or one of the people that lived with me during that time, who'd been friends with me, she knew exactly what had happened. And she's getting on my Facebook telling me, like, trying to invalidate my happiness here. I'm saying on on this post, like, I'm so happy and I'm so in love. And, she's telling me, like, basically, I don't know my own happiness. I don't know what happiness is. And I don't get to be happy in this relationship because she doesn't agree with it, because she thinks I should be in some kind of heteronormative monogamous relationship, which, I'm not dissing monogamy at all. Everybody's entitled to the relationship that they want to be in, and that's just the point. And so that was kind of like a rain on my parade situation that just felt unnecessary, I think, at the end of the day. But and then when I was talking about how, oh, hey guys, by the way, I'm an atheist and I'm happy about that, then I had more people trying to get on there and tell me that I didn't know what was good for me. I didn't know what happiness was. And then, like I said, I'd post something that would be like, oh, hey, I'm against or I'm for gun control, or I'm for, universal health care, things like that are, basis left-wing ideologies. And, these conservatives and evangelical people that I knew would get on my Facebook and get on these statuses and, again, just be ridiculously aggressive, to the point that I started getting anxiety anytime that I'd post something. And then I started responding aggressively back, because I'm like, I'm not taking this. And I don't know if that was right or wrong, honestly. Who's to say in that situation? But I just felt like there was a time in my life where it was like I'd post something and then I'd end up getting frustrated. And then just, there was this one person that I'd met maybe a couple of times at Bible study, and we were friends on Facebook, and all of a sudden he comes out of the woodworks to literally anytime I'd post something. I mean, it was very aggressive harassment, to the point that I had to block him on all social media, because it wasn't just, oh, he's commenting on my stuff. He would then go out of his way to tag me in things, to the point that after I had unfollowed him on Instagram, and I think I even blocked him on Instagram and unfriended him on Facebook, that he then comments on a mutual friends thing and is, again, harassing me. It was like really, like, it was bad, to the point that even people that he was friends with that were friends with me, some of our mutual friends, were like messaging me and being like, I'm really sorry for Michael's behavior. And I'm like, well, I mean, here's the thing, is that, yeah, I experienced that, and there are people out there on the internet that are shitty. But the reality is that there was just this emerging theme for me of, I'm not a Christian, so therefore I'm fair game to be picked on and to be harassed and to be told that I'm wrong, even though, and not just like, oh, I'm like, we have a differing opinion, or what's your perspective. It's, I don't care about your perspective. What matters is my perspective, and you have to agree with my perspective. I'm going to make a bunch of assumptions about you that probably aren't true, but that fit my agenda. And then I'm going to use that to just be mean and nasty. You know, it's like, it's one thing to tell somebody to, like, it's one thing to leave somebody's house, and it's another thing to scream insults at them on the way out. I mean, that's kind of how it started to feel. It's like, you know, you don't have to be friends with me, fine, but like, you don't have to be nasty about it. And that's where I started to feel like, it's like, you know, like, why are you even talking to me at this point? Like, why does it even matter? We're never going to agree on these things, and now you're just kicking off all my anxiety. And you know, it's, like I said, I ended up in a place where I didn't even want to post on Facebook anymore about anything controversial. It's part of the reason why I don't post a lot anymore. Like, I'll just post like pictures of me and one or two memes. Rarely are they political anymore, unless I really care about them or I think they're particularly good, because I'm just so burnt out from the experience, you know? And I was terrified when I came out as non-binary. Like, I was genuinely Hi, Mama. Sorry, dog. Hi, Boopy. You know, here I am. I'm genuinely terrified when I came out as non-binary, because I had been attacked on every angle. So I figured somebody was going to come along and try to invalidate my gender identity on top of everything else, which don't even. Sorry, it's falling out of my ear. Off. No, I'll pet you later, okay, Mommy? I'll pet you later. Oh, I know. I can't help it. All right. Off. Good girl. So yeah, and like I said, it came from people who, it's not like all this group of people from this Bible study or this church, they were the only people that are harassing me. These different states, different congregations, different, you know, walks of life, all of them with this same theme of, they felt this need to attack me. And I think the ironic thing about it to me, the sadly ironic thing to me about it, was that it's like, if the tables had been turned and I had been doing those things to them, they would have seen it as persecution. Like, they would have cried persecution, religious persecution up the wazoo about that. And they might have been right, to be honest. But just because I don't have religious beliefs that align with yours doesn't give you a right to then persecute me back and call it tough love. It's not tough love. This is a philosophy that has existed in the evangelical church almost my whole life, and probably longer than that, is this idea that people know the truth. You know, it doesn't matter if, you know, you don't feel like you have enough belief. Like, people know in their hearts that there's a God. And so then that means that what we have, like what evangelicals have to do, and what the job of a Christian is to essentially, you know, love somebody hard enough so that they come back, but not like in a, hey, we love you and we accept you. No. We're not going to love and accept you the way you are, because that's sinful. So we're going to be mean to you and excommunicate you and harass you so that you'll want to be a Christian again. I don't really understand it. It's like they think that ultimately we're going to come back and be like, you know what, you were right, and thank you so much for loving me enough to tell me that I was wrong. It's like, it's not going to happen. Maybe some people it works, but it's like, it's not just me. I mean, it's not just even evangelicals. It's members of the LGBTQ+, where parents and friends and family members are pressured to treat their children, their friends, their family like this, to say what you're doing is wrong, who you are is wrong, and I'm gonna kick you out of my house. I'm gonna make your life a living hell so that you'll not be gay anymore, or you'll not be trans anymore. Like, you know, it's not just people who have a different philosophy from them. It's also people who have a gender, you know, have a different gender identity or a different sexuality than they think that they should have. And it's, you know, it's a well-known issue that the secular world has with evangelicals, is the rampant homophobia. But it's, it's also an issue with, evangelical children, friends, family. If you're not living the way that you should, we're going to just keep on you and tell you the truth, tell you that what you're doing is wrong, aggressively, I might add, until you turn your life around. And that's just not how it works. All that does is breed resentment and pain, and can further somebody's trauma. If somebody has experienced trauma at the hands of the church, which, by the way, not an uncommon thing, especially in conservative fundamentalist circles, if somebody has experienced trauma in the context of Christianity, and they're telling you that this is, that's part of the reason why they can't go to church anymore, and they can't believe in a God that would allow that to happen, what they get in response is, oh, well, you just had a bad experience, and this isn't about the people in the church, this is about God. And it's like, but God and the people are wrapped up in one, because the people of the church see themselves as God's representatives on earth. So how am I supposed to believe that a God who is loving and all those things exist when his representatives are spiteful and hateful and aggressive, malicious, toxic people? I'm not saying everybody who went after me was like that. And I'm not even saying all the Christians that I knew back then, or that I know, are like that. There's like 3 people. I know that sounds bad, but like there's at least 3 people that I still, respect, I guess, that I can still be civil with, or that can still be civil with me, who are not going out of their way to be nasty to me. And that's about it. It's not like I talk to them all the time, but we keep in touch, sort of, in our own way. But everybody else has either spent way too much time and effort trying to, bully me back into being a Christian, or they've just stopped talking to me for literally no reason other than the fact that the only thing I can imagine is the fact that, hey, I'm not a Christian anymore. They don't think they have anything in common with me, which, take that as you will. But personally, I think that's kind of a grim way of living, that you can't be friends with somebody, you can't have a relationship with somebody because they don't believe in the same God as you, And I know where these teachings come from. This is the thing. I know where these teachings come from. I know that they have root in the Bible. It's just, and I'm not here to discuss about correct interpretations or not, but there's so many other things in the Bible that people can focus on. Why are you focusing on the teachings that, encourage you to excommunicate people and be hateful to people and be nasty to people? Why are you using verses that you can use as a justification for being like that, when there are so many other verses about loving your neighbor and taking care of people and hanging out with people that society has pushed aside and loving, people no matter what? And I know that the people out there who have harassed me and who have, done the things to me are going to come back and say, oh, well, I love them, that's why I did that. And that's the thing that bugs me, is that that is such a messed up view of what love is. Just because I'm doing something that you don't agree with doesn't mean that you get to then shove your perspective down my throat and call it love. That's not love. Love is allowing somebody to be who they are, and it doesn't matter if you agree with that. You don't have to have them in your life necessarily, but you can love them enough to respect that and to walk away and leave them alone at the very least, instead of going out of your way to be like, hey, by the way, you're wrong, and you need to not be wrong. You need to agree with me. It's arrogant. It's arrogant, and it's messed up, is really what it is. And I know I'm getting a bit worked up here. I've spent many sleepless nights because of a lot of this. I have cried my eyes out over all of this, and I wasn't sure if I was going to do any of that today, but I just wanted to share my story, because I think it's important that we start talking about why there's this antagonism. And it's not because of persecution, or because the secular world wants to be dominant or whatever. It's because there is a large group of very vocal Christians out there who are going out of their way to hurt people in the name of Jesus, and it needs to stop. Like, point blank, period. It needs to stop. And, I know that I'm not an important person and whatever, but I want to tell my story so that maybe, if you're going to an evangelical church and you start seeing this kind of stuff out, don't be afraid to call it out. Think about what that does to other people and how that might affect the way that they see God. I don't see myself going back to any kind of organized religion. And part of that has to do with the way that I was treated after I left. Maybe I'll believe in a God at some point, but I'm not going to go back to church. Sure as hell not going to go back to church, because that's a toxic place and has been a source of a lot of pain for me. And, and the reason is the people who were there. So, like I said, this isn't an attack on Christianity. This is just me telling my experience and having an opinion on it. And, if you're an evangelical person and that's not your viewpoint, great. If you know that you've been guilty of this in the past, maybe not to me, but maybe to somebody else, I hope it gives you cause to think. And, I want to see better communication fostered between the religious community and the non-religious community, because I think that we can all learn from each other. I think that everybody brings a unique perspective, and as long as nobody's hurting each other, we can, still grow and learn. We don't have to be separate from one another. We can be friends. We have things in common that have nothing to do with religion, like movies and sports and all that kind of stuff. And it's time we started focusing on the positive rather than judging each other based on your philosophical or religious beliefs. So that's what I wanted to say today. I hope you enjoyed it, or you didn't have to. I don't really care. It just makes me sound like a cheesy YouTuber, which I'm not yet. No, I can't create content. Anyway, so, be kind, don't be kind. I don't really give a shit anymore. But hopefully you were able to watch this to the end. If you watched the first 5 minutes and then decided to make a judgment call and comment something nasty, well, that's on you. I have the right to delete people's comments. Not going to, probably, but I still reserve that right because it's my Facebook. Anyway, hope you guys are well. Stay safe, get vaccinated, and enjoy your summers.